schedule for next class is case number 1, H&H fishing lures. I brought some hard copies if you want to look at them. It's going to have you doing kind of the same thing, that demand estimation. But in this case, we've got a seasonal business. We've got a business selling fishing lures, and their business is really hot around June, July, and August. And then it goes to hell. There's nothing. That's very common in a lot of businesses.
Especially around here.
Yeah. What happens in Gainesville? What's the difference between September and July?
Oh, yeah.
Football season.
Yeah. So
Somehow I printed them wrong.
what do you do, let's, maybe as a takeoff point, just discussion, what do you do with a seasonal business when you know that all your business is coming in from June through August? And you know by January, it's skinny. And by May, you're dying. Well, how do you address that kind of a problem?
You adjust your pricing accordingly.
Say again?
You adjust your pricing accordingly.
Could be that you offer some better discounts in your off seasons. Try to fill them up. If you had a hotel or something, we know they do that.
I know some businesses, which retail does, they hire seasonals, and so you don't keep them
Right.
for summer.
You
so
hire
have less
temporary
people.
seasonal
Yeah.
employees
So
that
you
you can
hire
pay a
them in
whole
the
lot
holiday
less.
time and you lose them.
Good.
Come
What else? Any other ideas? And I'm talking strategy as opposed to necessarily application.
When I managed a bakery, we had really big seasons throughout the year,
Really?
which, you know, obviously Christmas and Thanksgiving, and those were like our biggest. And then there was Easter later on in the year, and then there was, you know, Father's Day, Mother's Day were smaller, Valentine's Day, stuff like that.
Mhm.
But there were, in the summertime, it's like dead. So we thought about just closing the store,
Okay.
Some restaurants do that.
or like shorter hours
Mhm.
during the summer.
To the extent that that reduction in activity is reducing your sales, I mean your costs.
Right.
Because if you cut your hours, but you don't really cut your costs, you're working in the wrong direction.
Right.
In the taxidermy business, our slow season starts around April, May, and stays till about September. Well, we had a shop that was located on a few acres of land. My partner had some experience as a dog trainer, and she started doing dog training education. We'll teach you how to manage your dog in the off season.
So she
Well,
said,
what do we know about hunters?
They have dogs.
They got dogs. And so one of the strategic thinking ideas is, who are your customers now in your busy season? And if they are local, what else do they buy? What else needs do they have? What other interests do they have? One of the things we missed the point on with so many, and again I'm talking small businesses, but even some of the larger ones, we don't really know who our market is. We don't know anything about them other than they come in there and they write us a check and they pick up their stuff and they go home. And that's, today with all the data we have available and the ability to collect it, you know, how can you collect information from your customers and build a reliable database of who they are? Many times ask them. Many times give them a form to fill out and tell them you want to put them on a mailing list. Anything you can do. And then what goes on that form? What kind of questions are you going to ask them?
their activities.
Every damn thing you can think of if you think you can get them to fill it out. You know, come on in, let me get you a beer, fill that out for me. Give me another beer, I'm still working on this, okay? The more you know about them, the more you discover all these other things they'd like to have. All these other things they'd like to do. So when we talk about this case, and we use it as a case, we're going to be talking about people who buy fishing lures. Not just fishermen, but retailers, distributors. And then what do? Well, we make this little metal, silly-looking, flashy fishing lure. But then we ask, well, what else could we be making? Given the tools, given the skills, given the raw materials we have access to, what else could we be making? Could we be making a different kind of fishing lure for ice fishing? And start selling that to distributors up in Minnesota. How hard would it be? Think about that. You got a little shop here in Gainesville or Florida somewhere, you're making fishing lures because everybody around here fishes for bass. And then you get this idea to make some ice fishing lures about which you know nothing, but you can learn. How do you go about getting those things distributed into retailers up in Minnesota and Wisconsin.
Your customers that are traveling, shooting.
If you
things
have
out.
any customer, and we did,
Yeah.
we had customers coming from
Yeah.
from the Key West all the way to
Snowbirds.
Minneapolis.
Snowbirds that come down.
Yeah, but in this case, we're not dealing so much directly with customers, we're dealing with distributors. My suggestion would be that you take you and your spouse and a 10-day trip and fly up there, rent a car, and go around and talk to every distributor you can. Talk to some of the fishing guides about what makes a good fishing lure. Set up some appointments before you get up there and have a nice vacation at company expense. And then come back down and let's kick us out a whole production line on ice fishing lures or something like that. You know? All right, I'll leave that alone for now. Economics, macroeconomics. The reason you have to watch all these silly videos on macroeconomics is because A, I think it's important, and B, it's not part of the curriculum in this program. I'm fighting to make it part, but so far without success. What is macroeconomics? Large scale. What is economics? What do you learn in economics? And I say it real simple. Economics is all about what are you going to do with what you got. That's all. Microeconomics is what are you going to do with what you got, or what are we going to do with what we got. A small business, a marriage, a partnership. Macroeconomics is what are we going to do as a state or a nation. What are we going to do with what we got? We tend to measure it in terms of three major indicators. We measure inflation, we measure output, and we measure employment. Those are our first measures in macroeconomics by which we look at the economy and say, how are we doing? Output, usually we're looking at gross domestic product, GDP. Inflation, usually we're talking about the consumer price index. What's happening to the prices you and I pay as consumers for the stuff we usually buy. And then unemployment, employment, we look at the unemployment rate each month, nationally, across the country. Well, one of the problems with macroeconomics is what's going on generally on the average around the country may not be happening exactly that way in your microeconomic environment. But it's still worth paying attention to it. Because beyond these three measures, there's one thing that is definitely going to affect a lot of businesses and a lot of their customers, and that is interest rates. I abbreviate that with a little letter I. How do interest rates impact you and me in our business? Well, if we're selling fishing lures, maybe not too bad. But if we're selling automobiles or houses or appliances, it could have a very large effect. So as we read the literature, as we read the newspaper, listen to the news, and God knows we got all the news we want right at our fingertips, hopefully you're staying aware of what's going on with this stuff nationally, within the state, and within your local geographical area, however big your market area is. Allied with that, the term trading area. What is the trading area of a business? You ever heard that term? We use it in retail a lot. It's the area from which your customers come. Where do your customers come from? And the classic example is you put a convenience store on the road here, and another one down the road here, and another one down the road here, okay? This one, point A, and it is 8 miles to the second store, and then it's 17 miles to the third store. What's the trading area for store B? How big is it? Halfway to that one, and halfway to that one. And then wherever their nearest competitors are, right, it's halfway to that. So now we've got a trading area that looks kind of like, oops, maybe like that. Of course, we're gonna change that based on the roads and the kind of customers that we have, et cetera. But if we can understand how big our trading area is, we're taking a first step towards understanding the market. And if we're in the fishing lure manufacturing business, and we've got outlets in 7 different locations around the state, we're looking at all of those, and we're asking, in those areas, maybe it includes Orlando, in those areas, what's going on here? How is economic activity? Because if it's weak, we got some problems. And in particular, a little terminology, we ask, what are we selling? And if the economy goes south, how bad will it be hurt or not? And in economics, we introduce, y'all probably saw this in micro or managerial, we introduce normal goods and inferior goods. You remember that?
Yeah.
What's a normal good? A normal good is a good that when people start earning more money, they buy more of it. Most everything out there is normal. Okay? Y stands for income. When incomes rise, demand for normal goods increases. If incomes fall, demand for normal goods decreases. But then we got this category of goods called inferior goods.
Ramen noodles.
Yeah, ramen noodles. What happens with ramen noodles? When people see their income fall, they buy more of it. And when they get more money, they don't buy that nasty stuff anymore. Okay, whatever. What's that got to do with strategy? If the economy goes up and down, on the times when it's going up, more people are getting jobs, people are working longer hours, they have more money to spend. If what you're selling in your company is a normal good, things are going to get better. But when the economy goes south, when we go into a recession, and people start finding themselves getting laid off or their hours cut back, their incomes fall, if you're just selling normal goods, your business is going to go down. So strategically, if we saw the economy was doing this frequently, what would we try to do? Maybe we carry both in some way. Imagine Publix, any grocery store. You better understand how the economy is going, okay? And how does Publix respond then? If they see the economy taking a real nosedive and incomes are going to fall, what's that going to do inside of a Publix store, do you think?
They buy less.
I would think they would promote their product more.
They are going to shift the most valuable resource they have, their shelf space. They're going to put more inferior, give more space to inferior goods, like Publix brands, like generic products, like hamburger, and less room for steak. And they're going to adapt to that environment. How do you and I do that? Taxidermy, normal good or inferior good?
It's a normal good.
Definitely a normal good. It's a luxury.
Yeah.
Okay, a luxury is a high-end normal good, you know? And when you suddenly you don't have any money, you don't need to put the damn deer on the wall.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, if he's roadkill, we're just going to
Eat it.
take the skin off of him and bring him home.
That's right.
Fishing lures, normal good or inferior?
It's normal.
Normal.
Unless you're fishing to feed your family, but
Yeah, not too much of that anymore.
yeah, I know.
Right.
Yeah. But normal.
So stick it in the back of your mind then as we're talking about the strategy for any given business. Whatever it is they're selling, most of them are selling normal goods. Is there any avenue of thought that says, could they position themselves to shift production more into some inferior goods if they needed to? Could they take the good they produce and in some way recharacterize it as an inferior good? Or take, I don't know, how do you suppose hot dogs and stuff like that ever came about?
Yeah.
When you slaughter a hog, you take the best cuts off.
Right.
Because those are, well, people love that. Definitely normal. Then you look at that carcass and it's got all that extra meat on it. I mean, there's 100 pounds of extra meat there. It's not the cut anybody wants to buy. What can we do with it? Trim it off of there, put it in the blender, spice it up, and call it sausage, call it hot dogs. Just don't look at what they made, right? But that's a brilliant ploy when you think about how can we offset the ups and downs in this macroeconomy. So, As we go through some of the macro, we're going to do it with a supply and demand graph. But it's going to be aggregate demand, meaning the total demand in the country for everything, all goods and services. Pool tables, pizzas, automobiles, everything. And we're going to have a demand curve with a negative slope, the way we usually do, aggregate demand. And on this axis, while we used to put price, we're now measuring the price level or the rate of inflation. And on this axis, where we used to put Q, well, it's still quantity of everything, GDP. And what that says is that when prices come down, people buy more. Nothing rocket science about that. Normally, we draw a supply curve to look like what? Upward slope. Well, I'm going to leave them there for a minute, just for a minute though. What do we call that intersection of the two curves? That's the point of equilibrium. And from that, we read to each axis, right? We read over to the price level and see how high our price is. And we read down to the quantity level to see how much stuff we are making in the country. Okay, so far? The other thing we are measuring that we didn't really put on the graph, instead of just Q, we're also measuring unemployment on this bottom axis. Because as we produce less stuff, if we wind up producing less stuff down in here, what happens to unemployment? It's up. There's a lot of people not working. So unemployment gets higher in this direction and lower in this direction. Okay so far? Let me take that supply curve. Well, let's move it. See what happens. So, suppose we had an increase in demand. What is demand? Let's talk about just for a second. Demand is spending. It's how much stuff is being bought. Spending is the engine that drives our economy. If people aren't spending money, businesses ain't got no business. There is talk in the media. Who are the job creators of America? Who is it that creates jobs in America? And one group of people will say it's the owners of businesses. They create jobs. And if you help businesses grow, they'll create more jobs. Okay? Unfortunately for them, that means give lots of breaks to businesses, but businesses are not going to create jobs until they have
People that are buying.
customers. So when we talk about the job creators in America, that's us. If we don't have the money, we're not going to spend, and there's not going to be any damn jobs. And we've been very sick in that regard for the last 8 years. 7 years. So spending's the big thing. Spending comes in 4 types. Spending by households, me and you out there buying our ramen noodles or whatever. Businesses, when they spend money to buy new equipment or build a new office building or build some inventory. Governments, all levels, state, local, federal. About 1 in every 6 jobs in America is a government job or directly related to it. And then finally, the foreign sector. We sell stuff to other countries. Unfortunately, we buy more than we sell, but that's our spending, and so we'll throw those in there every once in a while in the discussion. Well, take a look at my graph with me for a minute. Suppose that somebody just spread pixie dust and we all had 20% more cash tomorrow and we started spending more money. What happens to our picture? Increase in spending is a shift to the right of the curve. Our equilibrium goes from here at A up to here at B. Are we better off or worse off at point B? Here to here. We're now producing more stuff, more toys, more cars, right? And
unemployment.
It's taken more people to do that, so unemployment has fallen. That's good news. What's the bad news?
Cost.
Prices have risen. It's costing more to produce stuff. So you can read the graph with me, okay, when I start moving the curves around. We don't move the supply curve too much. We'll get into that later. This is the video, basically, you couldn't get to come up. Aggregate supply, aggregate demand. Measures those three things and spending and
I
whatever.
saw the video, the second one, which was, I think, the policy section.
Yeah.
I got to watch that one.
Okay, we're good. What I would like to do tonight, in the next 5 or 10 minutes, and try not to keep you too late, I want to show you two different graphs. Some people in the world think that this is what the aggregate supply curve looks like. It is straight up and down. The level of GDP, where it touches down here, how much GDP is being produced, we call full employment output. That's if we had everybody working. At that level, the unemployment rate is going to be about 5%. Why 5% and still call it full employment? Because there's always some unemployed people out there. They're between jobs, they just finished college, they got laid off because their skills are out of date, discrimination. But what does that mean to draw that curve there? To draw that supply curve vertical?
Nothing changes.
It means that no matter what happens to aggregate demand, equilibrium is always at full employment. That in this model, we will always move to full employment in our economy. If aggregate demand decreases, let's go from AD2 to AD1. What is that describing? Well, things got bad, we got scared, everybody stopped spending. Businesses looked around and said, where's my damn customers? I ain't got no customers, so I started laying off my employees. They don't have a paycheck, so they're not spending anymore either, and it repeats itself. And bingo, we got a lot less spending. Well, the people that believe in this model say, well, here's what will happen. I got this drawn just a little bit awkward. Need to make that go up there. They say, we're going to go from A, where we had everybody happy and fully employed, and we're going to go over here to B. And at B, what happened to unemployment? Unemployment went to 17%. How's that? Bad news. And their response is, it's okay. Because what's going to happen? With all those people looking for jobs, businesses are going to be able to hire people cheap. Wages are going to come down. Because if you got a job making $12 an hour and there's 34 people that want your job, some of them will work for $6 an hour. And so wages will fall. And as a business, as I get my wages, one of my major costs to fall, then I can cut my prices. And what happens when I cut my prices? Customers start coming back through the doors. Sales increase. And that's what happens when we go from B down this curve to C. Gradually unemployment reduces, sales increase, just prices are lower. Which is fine. Wages are lower, prices are lower, but we're back to full employment. Now this belief, this system, this model, is called the classical or neoclassical system or model for macroeconomics. What was the role of the government in getting us out of this huge recession or depression? What did the government do?
A recent one.
Right here, in this model. Not a damn thing.
Yeah.
This is the we don't need government. What's the term laissez-faire mean? Laissez-faire?
Heard it.
Let it be.
It means let it be, let us be. Laissez-nous-faire. This is the hands-off version of what government should be doing. Basically nothing. Because the economy will cure itself. And the logic behind it is very appealing. Or it was. Until about 1933. In 1929, and this is the American economy, the European economy did this first. in America in 1929, we went into the Great Depression. Without going into the whys and everything, basically we saw the demand curve change. We went from A to B and waited and waited and waited. 1929, October. 1930. 1931. The president at that time, Hoover, was going to be reelected, he thought, in 1932. Well, surely between October 29 and November of 1932, surely this will fix itself and I can get reelected. Sure, man, don't worry, it's going to fix itself. And we waited, and we waited, and we were in misery. Who won the 1932 election? Franklin Roosevelt, a Democrat, who at that time was proposing that instead of sitting here for so long, government could help fix things, and was immediately called by many large businesses a communist. Oh, he's going to have the government take over everything. Well, Roosevelt came to office in January 1933, and he began his alphabet soup, government agencies, government programs, etc. In 1933, unemployment was 25%. And this is in a society where in most families you had one breadwinner. Okay? Nothing like today. Today's equivalent, I don't know, 40% unemployment? How high has it been since then? Went up 1981, 82, it went to 11. In 2008, 2009, 10.7. So we've never come anywhere close to that.
And in 2009 in Hawaii alone, it was 12%.
Yeah, many localities, especially in the Northeast and Midwest, had much higher unemployment. So another school of thought comes along and says, the problem with this, we can show it graphically by drawing this kind of demand curve, a supply curve. It's going to be different. Aggregate supply goes out, and at the full employment level, it goes up. So you have a right angle, or what we call a sharp break supply curve. And it said, when that happens, and aggregate demand goes from AD1 to AD2, equilibrium goes from A to B, done, end of conversation. We're going to sit here forever. We're going to sit here for a very long time. They didn't deny this. They just said that this whole process, if it works, is going to take a hell of a long time, during which time millions of people are hurting. And we think we can fix it. Well, how are you going to fix it? Well, remember what we call aggregate demand? Spending. If we can get people spending money again in this economy, businesses will have customers and they will need employees. Well, how are we going to do that? Sign a paper here, son. You're now working on Works Progress Administration, government job. Here you are. Here's your rate. Go out and rake leaves. There ain't no leaves. Rake. Here's your paycheck. So we created all these jobs, all this spending, and what else? What else helped us move aggregate demand and spending back out to close to full employment? This starts in 1933. Well, we raised the minimum wage, 1938. From 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, it's getting better, it's getting better. People are spending more money, businesses are hiring more workers, the unemployment rate is coming down, coming down, coming down, coming down. There's a little glitch in there, but there was a real boost to the economy in December of 1941. Pearl Harbor.
I was going to say, we went to war. I was trying
That's
to think
right.
of this. Yeah.
So what happens when we go to war?
Yeah, then
All that
more
spending by government goes right through the roof, and they spend so much money, aggregate demand really starts going out. They had to have price controls, and try to hold on to inflation, but we got everybody back to work. This school of thought that says the economy won't fix itself is called the Keynesian school, for John Maynard Keynes. And I think it's important you understand both of those arguments. And we'll go through them in a little more detail. We'll watch the video. Why didn't wages fall the way they're supposed to? Because unions didn't want them to. And if you've got bad business and you've got 100 employees and you've laid 80 of them off, Which 20 have you kept? Which
That's
20?
it.
The very best. The very best. And when you turn to them and say, take a wage cut or walk, if they walk, you're in trouble. Wages don't just drop down real fast. Even if you get wages down, do businesses go out and cut their prices as far as they can, as fast as they can? No, just a little bit, see if I can get any little more business. It takes a while. So by the time all this occurs, plus, by the way, if everybody went from making $2 an hour to $1 an hour, and the price of bread went from $1 a loaf to 50 cents a loaf, can you buy more stuff? No, you can't. So there were some problems here, but this is still very much alive. A lot of people believe strongly in it. I think we've had an excellent exercise for the last 7 years to see how well this works. Because has government increased spending or done anything to create jobs? No, our Congress has been so, what's the word I want, gridlocked, we haven't gotten any policy out of them at all. Very little. So we've had a good chance to see how well that's worked. That recession started in December 2007. The recession went up into 2009. Are we a lot better off now?
Not a lot.
No, we're still sick. We're still real sick. So for me, the last 5, 8 years has been living proof that while this may work, it is not going to work fast, and there's a lot of misery involved in waiting it out. Okay? That's the general theme I want to get across to you. I want to be clear. This is my opinion. I don't think this works. I don't think this is viable. If you read anybody from the Tea Party, the Republican Party, and those folks, they're going to argue that this is still valid. I don't know how.
So, can I ask you, how do you place, like, obviously, because you said recently we've been kind of using the classical, but really, it seems like we've been using the Keynesian, because you had government bailouts, the car companies, housing.
We've had bailouts that kept us from going deeper. We never had enough bailout and help to stimulate things. Turn this off.
Yeah, so, but I look at just the last year,
Yeah.
for instance.
Mhm.
I'm looking at the housing market, for instance. And in the last year, well, I'd say about 2 years, since I bought my house 2 years ago, I can see the housing pricing going back up. So there is, now granted, it was years before it started hitting that, but it is now.
It is beginning to heal, no question. This, in fact, is beginning to work. But my argument is it's taken 7.5 years.
Right.
Yeah. It's beginning, it had not all worked yet. I mean, if we're getting closer to full employment, we're still up here somewhere.
So you feel like the government's using the classical and not?
No, I feel like that what the Democrats wanted to do was more of this, and the little bit they did do, including the bank bailouts, and they gave us a stimulus, $687 billion, which was about 1/10 of what we needed to really restore the economy. Because and this takes us into the next videos I want you to be aware of, austerity versus stimulus. One of the things that's been going on during this huge recession especially, as people lose jobs, they stop paying taxes because they ain't got no income. And so the government had less money coming in, lots of money going out. Its deficit was getting huge. And yeah, let's start a war. Let's give new drug policies for seniors, etc. And so the argument became, well, we need to pay off the debt. Well, in order to pay off the debt, you've got to reduce government spending or raise taxes. And if you do those, that demand curve just moves further and further left. So it was an argument on which do we need to take care of? All this unemployment and these jobs that we don't have, or this debt? Because if you fix one, you make the other one worse. And so next class we'll talk about, should we be austere and pay off our debts, or should we stimulate the economy and create jobs? Because you can't do both. Whichever one you do, the other one gets worse. And that's been the real debate. I think there's some lessons to be learned there too.
There's no black and white answer.
No, there's two. They're diametrically opposed answers.
And that's why they're in gridlock.
And that's why they're in gridlock, just exactly.
Yeah.
So we'll pick that up next time. Okay, your questions, anything? I'm pretty well wrapped up for the evening. Anything else on your mind? Okay, take a look at case number 1, H&H spinning lures or fishing lures, and see what you can draft up in the way of some notes and discussion points on that for next time, and we'll do that. Okay?
Okay.
Peace.